So Batman Zero Year, the latest sort of big Batman event is upon us, by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo now. Batman is probably my favourite monthly comic being released at the moment. I've been reading it since issue 1 and really digging it, and now that Zero Year is a couple of issues in, I really wanted to sort of take the opportunity to do the sort of story so far for Zero Year, and dependent on the reception of this video, I may go back and do the Court of Owls and Death of the Family as well. So Zero Year basically picks up a few threads of storyline that Scott Snyder planted in issue 0. Now this was released back in November 2012. This issue sort of opens up, and it's actually 6 years ago, so early in Batman's career. It's a bank robbery orchestrated by the Red Hood and his gang, the Red Hood gang. And you establish that basically Bruce Wayne has infiltrated the gang, but gets caught out, and a sort of a chase ensues. He then sort of flees to the mansion, and you have Alfred ask him, why are you trying to fight crime this way, and stuff like that. Now, I do want to say that the artwork in this is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I really love Greg Capullo's artwork. I do think he's one of the better artists sort of working today. Although a criticism I have of his artwork, and I've had this since issue 1, is that while his artwork itself is great, the layout of his pages can be somewhat confusing for the reader. You're not sure where to look. Now this isn't a particularly overt example, but as you can see here, I mean, the artwork itself is great, but these panels here, what looks like a building, and it turns out that it's a cake. When I first read this, I was a little bit confused as to where to look, if that makes sense. That's not the best example, but I do find that his layouts can sometimes be confusing. But anyway, so back to the story. This issue, I actually think, is the best issue in Zero Year so far, and I hope that people don't forget that this was the first issue of Zero Year, because it was so many months ago. Essentially, what I like about it is it establishes Red Hood as a villain not to be messed with, and I'm sure that already established fans of Batman and the comics will know the history of Red Hood. I'm not going to go into that now in case there's any sort of readers here who aren't aware of the Red Hood's history. It's a really strong opening. The whole bank robbery sequence, and the sequence where they sort of catch Bruce Wayne infiltrating their gang and impersonating one of their own, is very tense. Now, Scott Snyder in this issue takes a very sort of Hitchcockian approach to tension. He gives the audience information. Later on in the book, there is a scene between Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon, where Bruce Wayne is basically on the roof testing a sort of boomerang which has a delayed response in coming back to you. So you throw it sticks in a wall, it has a timer, and when the timer reaches 0 it flies back. Now Bruce Wayne throws the batarang just as Jim Gordon is coming up to the roof to talk to him. The batarang is stuck in the wall while they're talking, and here you can see as they're talking it shows the timer, and Bruce Wayne basically has to try and get Gordon off the roof before it flies back. Gordon's essentially asking Bruce Wayne, do you know anything about this vigilante, and also I have concerns about your uncle Philip Kane running Wayne Enterprises, and all the rest of it. So it establishes that Bruce Wayne has returned to Gotham. I think they say 3 months ago. And obviously people know that he's back because Jim Gordon knows that he's back, and all the rest of it, because he stayed dead for a while once he first got back to Gotham. This is a sort of criticism I have of this story arc so far, is that issue 0 takes place 3 months after Bruce Wayne's announced return to Gotham. And Zero Year, sort of the first official issue of Zero Year, which is issue 21, takes place 6 weeks after his return. And there are certain events in the subsequent issues, so 21 and 22, that at first glance don't marry up with the timeline established in issue 0, sorry, not Paranorman, issue 0. And I'm sure that Scott Snyder, as the issues progress, will sort of tie them all together. But I had to actually sort of flick back and forth in both books to establish the timeline of what was happening and when. So yeah, anyway, issue 0, like I said, I actually think this is the strongest issue of Zero Year so far. A criticism I have, and the reason that I think this is the strongest, is that the subsequent issues become quite repetitive. They sort of start with a scene of Bruce Wayne messing up the Red Hood's plans and then returning to, you know, his sort of Batcave or whatever the case may be, and talking to Alfred, who's basically saying to him, look, you need to be more Bruce Wayne and less of this vigilante. And all these issues start that way. So you have issue 0, which has that same sort of dynamic throughout. You also have at the end of this issue a very sort of touching, and I would say touching story. It basically shows Jim Gordon setting up the backlight on top of the police station with his daughter, as you can see there. I don't know how well that shows up on camera. It basically shows what all the Robins are up to. So you've got Dick Grayson, Tim Drake, Jason Todd, you know, all doing their different things, and the last sort of few panels are them looking up into the sky and seeing the backlight shining over Gotham. You then see Jim Gordon's daughter, who becomes Batgirl, looking at it as well, as you can see there. And I thought that sort of epilogue was very well done. That's actually not written by Scott Snyder, that was written by James Tynion IV, which is a great name. He wrote Talon as well, which was the spin-off series, which I think I read the first 10 issues and then dropped it from my pull list because due to financial reasons. So yeah, 0 Year is a great issue. It's one of the best issues of Scott Snyder's entire Batman run, in my opinion, in terms of establishing different threads of storyline that will be picked up later on. It's just very interesting, it's paced very well, and I really, really enjoyed it. We then move on to, you know, cut a few months when he's doing Death of the Family, and we move on to issue 21. So this is the first official issue of 0 Year. Now this starts with Gotham basically looking like a aquatic post-apocalyptic wasteland. You sort of half expect to see Kevin Costner running across one of the panels. This again is 6 years ago, and we start with Batman saving a girl who is attacked, and here we see him in his Bat costume riding a motorcycle. So straight away we establish, you know, we're going to see him become Batman sort of very shortly, or at least that's the impression we get. Now, it then cuts to Bruce Wayne saving a truck full of sort of low-level company executives who have refused to join the Red Hood's gang. Here is, you know, a couple of panels. Again, the artwork is absolutely fantastic. I love it. So he saves the truck full of guys and basically foils the Red Hood's plans again, and even flips them off, which felt oddly out of place, but I suppose that's sort of a character beat in as much as, you know, Bruce Wayne is very young and impulsive at this point in his career, and that's why they did that, but I found that to be quite odd. He then returns to his sort of hideout, because I don't believe he's in Wayne Manor at the moment. He's actually living in an apartment near Crime Alley where his parents were killed all those years before, because he feels like that's where he needs to be. At this point, I believe this is only 6 weeks after Bruce Wayne returned to Gotham, and he's still legally dead. Nobody knows his heir other than Alfred, his butler, obviously. Now, we see Bruce Wayne, you know, testing some sort of adhesive boots, which come into play in the next issue, and Alfred saying to him, you know, look, I think you should sort of become Bruce Wayne. You know, your parents dealt with problems in Gotham in a very public way, and they did it as the Waynes, not as vigilantes, and I think you should be more Bruce Wayne. And then as Bruce Wayne's sort of leaving, he gets intercepted by his uncle, Philip Kane, who you can see there, who basically tells him, please come back to the company and be our public figurehead, you know. We need a Wayne at the top of Wayne Enterprises for the public to have more faith in us, because I think it was Kane Chemicals is the name of his company, has, since Bruce was declared legally dead, has merged with Wayne Enterprises, and they're developing sort of futuristic weaponry, which Bruce isn't very happy about. So that's again, it follows the same sort of template as issue 0, in that you have Bruce Wayne foil the Red Hood's plan, you have him return to his hideout and talk to Alfred about his intentions, and then you have him talk to a third character, setting up a new thread. So it definitely follows the same template, although, you know, it is a very entertaining issue. Where it sort of becomes noticeable that it's becoming repetitive is in issue 22, where this one opens with basically Bruce Wayne foiling another Red Hood plot to exchange Wayne Enterprises weapons on an airship. You know, he's in disguise as the Penguin. As you can see here, you've got the Red Hood as well. And the Red Hood, like, when he finds out that, you know, oh, it's this vigilante who's been giving us so much trouble hiding out as a Penguin, he's like, I actually like this guy, you know, do you want to join our gang? I think you're great, you know, you keep fucking up my plans, but you're so good at it, like, let's join the gang. And he shoots one of his own gang members, basically says a spot just opened up, as you can see here, in that panel at the bottom. God, I don't know how well that shows up. So I thought this was a really, really good scene. So basically Bruce stabs the Red Hood, gets some of his DNA and flees, goes back to his hideout. Needless to say, he doesn't find anything from the DNA. And then talks to Alfred again. And Alfred's saying, look, you know, the fact that you're not being Bruce Wayne at the moment shows that you're taking your eye off the ball. The fact that the Red Hood is walking around with Wayne Enterprises weapons shows that you are failing to a certain extent. You need to be Bruce Wayne, and Bruce disagrees. And there is actually a moment in this, and I won't give away the whole conversation, but where Alfred slaps Bruce. And this is a moment that I'm sure will go down in Batman history as one of the most unforgettable moments of modern Batman comics, when Alfred actually slapped Bruce across the face. So we then have them sort of fall out, and Bruce is then taken to the Gotham Museum by his uncle Philip Kane, who announces his return to Gotham. You know, he has a party there and says, my nephew Bruce Wayne is back. You know, he ousts Bruce. And I thought that's quite an interesting take on the story, in that, you know, it's not Bruce's choice to announce his return to Gotham. It was sort of forced upon him. His hand was forced. You also introduce Edward Nygma. He was actually introduced in the last issue, who is, of course, the Riddler, but this is before he was the Riddler. This is when he was just sort of a creepy advisor to Philip Kane and Kane Chemicals. So all the issues are actually really good and well written. They just are somewhat repetitive. They follow that template of foil the Red Hood, have a bit of an argument with Alfred, and then have, you know, a sort of final act. We also go to show in the issues how Bruce Wayne learnt to drive in Rio de Janeiro, and how to get creative when in a stressful and confined environment. Both those sort of epilogues are drawn by Raphael Albuquerque, is how you pronounce his name, the guy who drew American Vampire for Scott Snyder. Now there's just, you know, one sort of panel. His artwork's great. I love Raphael Albuquerque. I think his artwork's really, really good and very sort of unique, and definitely suits Batman, and makes the epilogues, you know, very sort of interesting. The final issue that I wanted to talk about in this video is Batman Annual Issue 2. This is more of a standalone story, and sort of loosely ties into Zero Year. It's basically, it follows the story of a new orderly at Arkham Asylum, who you can see there. It's his first night on the job, and Batman is actually there to test out Arkham's security systems. So they basically put him in a cell and tell him, you know, we want you to escape and show us where the holes in our security are. So Batman approaches the situation like, well, the Scarecrow would have access to this, or the Penguin would have access to this, and this is how they would escape, blah, blah, blah. While he's escaping, we introduce a character called the Anchoress. Now, forgive me if she's already been dealt with in sort of Batman lore, but I'm not familiar with the character of the Anchoress. She's been there for many years, and she put herself in the asylum. I won't spoil why, but for various reasons she put herself in the asylum and saw it as her sanctuary, and now blames the Batman for all the sort of evil freaks and rogues gallery that have been put in there since. She feels he's ruined her sanctuary. So she waits for Batman to arrive, which is this night, and then goes from essentially there. You can see her there. I actually thought this story was actually very effective. The way it ties into Zero Year, you know, there's one page of how it ties in, and I guess you could argue that it's somewhat tenuous, but I actually quite enjoyed how it tied in. It is only sort of a fleeting mention, and the story itself is a sort of standalone Bat story. in amongst this continuity, as you can see here, you know, it references the Court of Owls storyline. I found it to be very interesting and a little bit different. Now, Scott Snyder gets a story credit on this story, but it's actually written by Margaret Bennett. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Who, you know, does a great job of telling a standalone Batman story. So I actually really enjoyed the annual, because obviously the Bat annuals, and I'm sure this applies to all annuals, you know, they're sort of one-shot stories that may run parallel to the main, you know, storyline. But I enjoyed the annual. I'm enjoying Zero Year so far. I have to say that Zero Year is quite good in respect of Batman's origin has been told a million times by a million different people in a million different mediums. The definitive version is obviously Frank Miller's Year One. And I know that Scott Snyder has basically gone on record and said he doesn't want to redo Year One. He doesn't want to redo the aspects of the origin that have been done before, because there'd be no point. You know, they've been done to death. So he's chosen to focus on the sort of Red Hood aspect of the origin. And as I say, you know, we already know as fans a lot about the Red Hood, but the way that Scott Snyder's presenting it is actually quite different in a sense. I love the fact that he establishes that Bruce Wayne, before he's Batman, is just a vigilante running around Gotham, is very much a thorn in the Red Hood's side. And he also implies that, you know, Red Hood might know who Bruce Wayne is. So it's very much a game of cat and mouse. I think it's a shame that the books are almost repetitive in their structure. But that's not to say that they're poorly written, because I've really enjoyed each and every issue, and I cannot wait for issue 23 to see where this goes. I don't know how many issues long Zero Year is going to be, but I'm enjoying it so far, and I do want to keep reviewing Batman Zero Year along with Superman Unchained, which Scott Snyder's also writing at the moment and is illustrated by Jim Lee. Let me know, guys, if you want to see, you know, me review the previous story arcs in Batman, because, you know, it'd be an excuse to reread them, and I do enjoy talking about comics quite a lot. So, you know, in the comments, let me know what you think of Zero Year so far. Try to stay away from major spoilers. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. I'm really enjoying it. I'm looking forward to where Scott Snyder takes it. And I think it's another strong story arc. This is his third story arc after The Court of Owls and Death of the Family. That all these story arcs are really, really strong, and he's obviously a very talented writer. I don't yet think that his Batman has reached the levels of like Alan Moore or Frank Miller, because their stories very much transcend the genre and transcend the character, and I don't think we're there yet with Scott Snyder. But if this is anything to go by, I definitely think we can get there. I'm loving the run so far, and can't wait to see, you know, what happens next. So Zero Year, you know, if you're looking for a jumping on point with Batman, start with issue 21 is the official beginning of Zero Year, and would serve as quite a good jumping on point, which I would recommend. So yeah, Batman Zero Year, let me know what you think, guys.